The Benin Massacre of 1897. In the year 1897, one of the most brutal acts of imperialist aggression in African history took place: the British invasion and destruction of the Kingdom of Benin. This event, often called the Benin Massacre or punitive expedition, was not just a military conquest. It was a violent chapter in the global history of capitalist expansion, resource extraction, and class struggle. But to understand the Benin Massacre, we need to go beyond the battlefield to the deeper economic and political forces that shaped it. By the late 19th century, the Kingdom of Benin, located in present-day Nigeria, was a thriving civilization. Known for its highly organized political structure, impressive art, and economic wealth, Benin had maintained its sovereignty despite increasing European encroachment. The Oba, or king, ruled over a sophisticated society with a powerful bureaucracy and a well-structured system of trade. At this time, European powers were scrambling to carve up Africa, a process we now call the scramble for Africa. Under the logic of capitalism, land, labor, and resources were not just elements of culture, but commodities to be seized, exploited, and sold for profit. For the British Empire, West Africa was a critical source of palm oil, a commodity essential for industrial production, from soap to machinery lubrication. But there was a problem. The Kingdom of Benin controlled its own trade and resisted British interference. By the 1890s, British colonial officials were frustrated with Benin's trade restrictions. The Oba of Benin had imposed strict controls on the palm oil trade, ensuring that European merchants paid fair prices. This was an obstacle to the British economic model, one built on extraction and exploitation. For British merchants and industrialists, free trade meant forced trade, and any African kingdom that resisted was seen as an enemy. In 1897, the British saw their opportunity. A group of British officials, led by acting Consul General James Phillips, sought to visit Benin under the pretense of diplomacy. However, historical records suggest that Phillips's true intent was to forcefully remove the Oba and establish British economic control. The Oba, suspicious of British motives, refused to allow the mission to enter. Phillips ignored the warning and proceeded anyway, leading to an attack by Benin's warriors. The British used this as a pretext for full-scale invasion. What followed was not a war, it was a massacre. In February 1897, Britain launched a punitive expedition with 1,200 troops armed with advanced weaponry, including Maxim guns, an early form of the machine gun. The Kingdom of Benin, though militarily skilled, was overwhelmed by the superior firepower of the British forces. Benin City was set ablaze. Thousands were killed: soldiers, civilians, artisans, and members of the royal court. But perhaps the most infamous aspect of the invasion was the looting. The British forces systematically plundered Benin's treasures: exquisite bronze plaques, ivory carvings, and royal artifacts, most of which ended up in British museums and private collections. These artifacts, which told the story of centuries of Benin's civilization, were not just stolen, they were repurposed as trophies of imperial dominance. The Benin Massacre was not an isolated event, it was part of a broader pattern of capitalist imperialism. In his analysis of capitalism, Karl Marx described how industrial economies rely on the continuous expansion of markets and the extraction of resources. The British Empire was not driven by a moral mission to civilize Africa, as their propaganda suggested. It was driven by the economic imperative to dominate trade, exploit labor, and extract wealth. For the ruling class of Britain, the destruction of Benin was a victory, not just in military terms, but in economic ones. The raw materials of West Africa would now flow more easily into European markets. But for the working people of Benin, this was a devastating loss. It was a violent rupture in a system that had sustained them for generations, replaced by colonial rule, forced labor, and economic dependency. The effects of 1897 are still felt today. The Benin bronzes remain scattered across museums and private collections, their return still a subject of global debate. More importantly, the same economic forces that fueled imperial conquest, resource extraction, exploitative labor conditions, and economic dependency continue to shape Africa's relationship with global capitalism. History is not just about the past, it is about the present and the future. The struggle for economic justice, the fight against exploitation, and the demand for historical accountability are all ongoing battles. The kingdom of Benin may have been burned, but its legacy of resistance lives on. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe to Untold Africa. What do you think? Was the destruction of Benin purely an act of war, or was it economic imperialism in action? Let's discuss in the comments.